Well, I'm glad you made it here, you little slut. You ready for a full history of Spawn? Like, the entire fucking thing? That's good, because that's exactly what we're doing today. But before we get into that, I want to thank today's sponsor. My fucking self. Alright, listen. I have this business. It's called New Take Media. We make films, comics, and games from a ton of different genres. Horror, comedy, action, all sorts of crazy shit. Fantasy, steampunk. We ain't messing around over here. So if you like any of that, if you like films, comics, or games, click the link in the description below and join our mailing list to get notified early and before anyone else. With that said, grab your popcorn and lube up your cock, because you're going to be here for a while. Let's go. Why don't we start with the origins of Spawn? Right from the beginning. Al Simmons was a soldier and assassin that was considered the best of the best. He was the second eldest of 3 children born to Bernard Simmons, his father, who in a nutshell is a simp. And then his mother, Esther Simmons, who in a nutshell was a Satan worshipper. She even hooked up with one of the highest ranking demon lords, Mammon. At the time they knew him as Mr. Malefic, and essentially he was like a terrible stepfather to Spawn, delving into his darkest desires, teaching him how to kill, doing all bad shit. Simmons was murdered during a mission in Botswana for the USSG's Operation Night Strike by Jessica Priest at the order of Director Wynn. Now, who is Jason Wynn? Jason Wynn is the director of the United States Security Group, an umbrella agency encompassing the Central Intelligence Agency, the National Security Agency, and the National Security Council. He is perhaps the most powerful man in the world and has politicians throughout the government on his payroll. So he was essentially Al Simmons' boss when he was in the army and he was an assassin and all that shit. Jessica Priest, on the other hand, was a kid one day, 5 years old. She was outside of her house roasting marshmallows until her house burned down. She marveled at the flames, but openly admitted to a group of officers that she's the one who burnt the house down and killed her parents. And after receiving shock therapy for the shit she's done, and proving that she's an even crazier bitch than everyone thought, Jason Wynn came to her and recruited her for his cause, and she became one of the world's deadliest assassins, being the only one to have actually killed Al Simmons. Although people thought it was Chapel at first, which it was until copyright came along. And after being sent to hell for his actions, Al Simmons makes a deal with Malbolgia, one of the demon lords of hell, that he will get to see his wife again if he leads Hell's army. And boom! That is how Spawn was created. Now that we've gone through the origin, I'm going to go through the entire current comic run in increments of 20. Let's keep it moving. Spawn is brought into the alleyways of Rat City. It has been 5 years since he was sent to hell, and now he is suffering for it. His wife has a family now. She has a daughter named Cyan, who she had with Spawn's previous friend, Terry, who is in the army with him. So, yeah, this man is not having a good day. Alright? Then, we meet the Violator for the first time. The Violator is the oldest and most powerful of the 5 hellborn demons known as the Plebiac Brothers. Let me explain to you who they are real quick. We have the Vindicator. He's the taskmaster of the group who subjugates newly arrived souls in the 8th circle of hell. Then we have the Vandalizer. He's the most dominant of the brothers. He often takes the leadership role. Then we have the Vaporizer, big boy, and he's kind of dumb, not gonna lie to you. Then we have the Violator, and he's the smallest and weakest of the brothers. Throughout the centuries, the Violator was tasked with mentoring and keeping Hellspawns on track, and that includes our most modern Hellspawn, Al Simmons. Now, Al Simmons didn't like this shit, obviously, so eventually they started to fight, they started to get into skirmishes, but surprisingly in the comics, in the beginning, they were pretty evenly matched in power, so one didn't really get the victory over the other, and Malbolgia had to, intervene with the fight. It's also good to note that Spawn had a power bar at this time, so his power was very weak and very limited. He didn't know how to use them at all. He knew jack shit. So in the beginning, you see a lot more of these street level characters like Billy Kincaid. He's a child killer and pedophile who drove an ice cream truck, and he was investigated by Sam and Twitch, two regulars in the Spawn universe. They are two detectives, Twitch being more of the brains and a sharpshooter, and Sam just being a fat ass. That's really it. And Spawn eventually kills Billy Kincaid by shoving a ton of popsicle sticks in him and hanging him by chains in Sam and Twitch's office. Another one of these villains was Overkill. He used to be known as Nicholas Rocha in Sicily, but at age 13 he was already a thug running an extortion racket to a local business, and he was even a leg breaker for the mob. Eventually he killed the mob boss's son and was essentially torn apart and turned into a cyborg. Later on, he was hired by Tony Twist, a major mob boss in the Spawn universe, to attack Spawn and kill Spawn because Spawn killed his gang members and shit. When they fought, Overkill actually got the upper hand because, like I said, Spawn doesn't know how to use his powers. He has a power bar, so it's going down and Spawn's getting weaker. So Spawn had to gather up a huge arsenal of weapons, and then he came back with a vengeance and fucking destroyed Overkill. A lot of these villains are actually sent to hell, so Billy Kincaid is sent to hell, and inside of it he actually kills a demon, wears its skin. It's sort of barbaric, and there are multiple spheres to hell. So in the 6th sphere, you have these things called the Soul Trappers, and those are the big robot things you see there with the giant like fire hair and shit like that. Essentially, they take souls from hell and use them as fashion ornaments. And inside of hell, Billy Kincaid is tested to his limits. Like, he is forced to walk up all of these stairs on this endless tower that goes up the 12 spheres of hell. It's insane. And once he actually makes it to the top, he is turned into a hell spawn. But where there are demons, there must be angels. And one of the angels is Angela. She is essentially one of the most powerful freelance angel spawn hunters in existence. She has lived throughout the centuries, through medieval times, and she has killed tons of hell spawns. But when she interacted with Al Simmons, he's one of the most powerful hell spawns that she came across. She even like disintegrated him completely with their holy like light beams, and then he turned into a puddle, sucked her in, dragged her into another reality where she like freaked out and had to literally escape him because he's so fucking powerful. It was badass. Chances are you might even recognize Angela from the Marvel comics, and that's because she was owned by another creator, so she was moved to Marvel Comics. And there's been plenty of crossovers with different characters in Spawn from different universes. One of which was Cerebus. This dude is kind of like a Toon Force level creature. He can kind of like warp reality around you. And Spawn essentially went through absorbing the power from all of these different superheroes like Superman, fucking, Hulk, all these different heroes, right? It's crazy. It was like a metaphor for how creators give rights off to different companies. He even fights a dude named Byron from another series called Youngblood, which is where Chapel comes from, and he beats his ass. So Spawn crosses over with a lot of different people, including Batman, but we'll get into that. Now, why don't we get into the friends and family of Spawn? Alright, we'll start with Wanda Blake's grandmother, Granny Blake, Rosemary Blake. Now, Rosemary Blake, is an old timer. She's blind, and she's more of like a spiritual guide for Spawn whenever he interacts with her. She had a husband who died in the war, and we'll dive into more of that later as we pass by that storyline. And there's another friend that Spawn has in the alleyways, and his name is Bobby. He's a homeless dude who just tries to stand by Spawn's side no matter what, and no matter how much of a prick Spawn is to him. Now, I already talked about him a little bit, but let's talk about Chapel. Chapel was Al Simmons' subordinate in the CIA, and both have been paired up on numerous Black Ops missions across the world. So, after they fought a little bit, Spawn actually wound up branding a skull to Chapel's face, scarring him for life. And back to the not-so-friendly enemy of Spawn, on this timeline, we go back and have a little flashback about the Violator's origin and what he used to do. And like I said, he's lived through the centuries, so he was even in medieval times going up against medieval Spawn. So he battled against medieval Spawn cut his head off, and the Violator was actually seen as the first ever dragon. this is where those dragon stories come from, like the stories of the Knight and the Dragon, because the Violator actually like slaughtered entire towns. Another character that Spawn doesn't really like is Major Vale. Vale is a major in the United States military. He's been working with Jason Wynn for many years. They're kind of similar characters, and that is exactly why Spawn doesn't like him. He has covered up a ton of horrendous acts, and one of these is Simmonsville. Now, Simmonsville is an area in the Nevada desert. It was a nuclear test site, and at one point, it opened a gateway to hell. And now it is a gateway to hell composed of pure psychoplasm where demons roam free. And at one point, it went absolutely haywire, killing a ton of soldiers, and Spawn didn't like this shit, so he went in there, killed Major Vale, and destroyed Simmonsville. And during this event, Jason Wynn actually became the anti-Spawn, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's like Heaven's version of a Hell Spawn. And he battled Spawn, which also caused the destruction of Simmonsville. And after this, Spawn meets Houdini, a legendary magician who's trying to contain an atom bomb to see if it will kill demons. He teaches Spawn how to use his powers. By this point, Spawn is at one of his weakest states. I mean, his power level's very low. He's used up a lot of it by this point. And he also is in his classic state, so he doesn't know how to use them either. Either way, we have a Batman and Spawn crossover. So, Spawn and Batman crossover, they fight for a while, Spawn winds up winning, and then they team up together to fight like a cyborg. Spawn actually resurrects Batman, and then they become friends after that. But Batman decides to throw a batarang in Spawn's face, and Spawn ties together the cut in his face with a shoelace. So that's where you get the iconic shoelace Spawn face look. After this, Overkill is sent after Terry, and Spawn is met with Twitch. Now, because of the way that Twitch is, he wants to arrest Spawn, but Spawn's like, Terry's in desperate need of help because of false accusations from the FBI, and a mob is currently going after him. So why don't we help him instead of trying to arrest me? Sam and Twitch still don't really like Spawn at this moment, but they kinda understand where he's coming from. Then a bullet whizzes through his leg, and Spawn faces against Overkill once again until Twitch stops him by shooting a bullet right between his ear. The mob's going crazy, man. They even try to ram a car into him, but Spawn literally stops them by just standing in front of it. And because Spawn wants to induce fear into his enemies, he engraves his name onto the alleyway. Speaking of mobsters, Spawn also fights Tremor, and Tremor is essentially a former mobster who's turned into this superhuman demon-looking thing. Spawn beats him, and then they eventually team up for a little while. Spawn talks to Cagliostro, a mentor figure and a former Hell Spawn, but is then teleported to a dimensional umbrella, which is essentially heaven on earth, where he meets Gabrielle. She's essentially the director of the Angelic headquarters. She hires all of the freelance angel Spawn hunters and all that shit. She doesn't really like Angela, but that's why she has Spawn here. And after that, Cagliostro slowly helps Spawn reveal his own past. And in the very next issue, Spawn is attacked by the Curse, a man named Philip Kron. This dude was so religious that he literally chopped off his own right hand, thinking that he was giving God a sacrifice. This is how fucking insane this guy is. This man literally researches angels and demons so that he can hunt demons because he wants to serve Hell's army. He wants to be a soldier of God. But I ain't gonna lie, he's pretty badass. He has like an Iron Man suit and shit. He's pretty awesome. Either way, Spawn beats his ass at some point, and then he pins him to a wall. Wanda eventually discovers the curse in this alleyway, and she's attacked by a group of thugs. Now, Spawn attacks the thugs, and this is kind of when she meets Spawn in this stage for the first time. So she's more so afraid of him than anything, and this saddens him, obviously, because he was her husband. After fighting with Angela in the Angela miniseries, Spawn winds up injured, his power levels are even lower, and Andy Frank finds him and takes him inside of a sled, while Spawn's chains help move Spawn. Because, Spawn's too fucking heavy for this little kid to move. He's like 400 pounds. Well, shit turns dark as he usually does in Spawn. Turns out the kid's father's an abusive prick. Spawn obviously doesn't like this, so he finds the dude and brands him all over his body, saying, "I hit kids." And then, after that, the guy goes back to hit his kids again, But Andy's brother, Eddie, takes the man's gun, because he's a police officer, and shoots his father. And at one point, Spawn even fights the goddamn KKK, turning one of their members black. Their worst fucking nightmare. The curse is removed from the alley walls. He doesn't know where he went. None of the homeless knows where he went. And a Redeemer is being made, which is essentially an anti-Spawn. Yeah, he's pretty much the anti-Spawn. And Phil Timper is the one chosen to be it. He's just a normal family man. He's just chilling. He wants to live his life. But the angels are like, nah, man, you're going to be a Redeemer. Check this out. The Redeemer battles against Spawn, blowing a massive hole in his chest. And this is when Spawn actually goes through his first metamorphosis. Now, what is a metamorphosis? It's essentially when his suit adapts and becomes even stronger than it was before. Think of like muscle growth. You destroy it and then it rebuilds itself to become stronger. Same thing. Up in the angelic headquarters, Raphael goes to meet with God, an old fucking lady. Yes, that is what God looks like right now. Either way, Spawn's pissed, so he literally breaks in and is like, yeah, I'm gonna fucking kill this person, because the Redeemer actually captured Bobby. So yeah, Spawn's pretty pissed. Spawn battles the Redeemer once again and then escapes with Bobby. The Violator and Spawn fight inside of the sewers, but the Violator escapes being pulled out of the sewer by the Freak. And upon meeting Spawn for the first time, the Freak lies to Spawn, giving him a fake sob story about this guy named Dr. Delirium, who tortured him and did all this terrible shit. So Spawn kind of helps him get his revenge. After Spawn spends his time gathering his guns, getting ready for Jason Wynn. But we move on to a short story about Saigor's origin. Now, Saigor's real name is Michael. I don't know how to say his last name, so I'm not going to. But he was essentially Al Simmons' friend and squad mate. When he discovered the truth about Al's murder, he tried to blow the whistle on Jason Wynn. However, he was stopped and subjected to Project Sim. Now, Frederick William was essentially creating these cybernetic experiments to try to figure out how to save his wife. But instead, in an accident, the doctor wound up merging Michael with a fucking gorilla. Sucks for him. And while sitting on his throne of decay, which is a throne that the homeless made for Spawn, he gets electrocuted and stabbed and taken into the Curse's hideout. Meanwhile, Saigor has escaped the facility that he was once contained in and is actually hunting after Al Simmons' Spawn because he believes Spawn to be his creator. The Curse is very vengeful to Spawn since Spawn, hung him on a fucking wall, so he's making Spawn feel a lot of pain right now. And since the Curse has studied demonic origin, he understands what necroplasm is. It's essentially the very substance that composes hell and all of the sins of mankind. So he wants to collect this substance so that he can have control over Satan and so that he can destroy all of the wickedness of hell. But then Spawn escapes his binds, chops the Curse in half, and the Curse blows himself up inside of his castle. Later on down the line, another angel hunter is sent after Spawn, but Spawn literally fakes his decapitation by turning his head into a head of worms, and then summons a ton of creatures of the night to tear her apart. Because of his metamorphosis, Spawn is losing control of his uniform. Now, his symbiote has a mind of its own. It's sort of like Venom, so keep in mind that he doesn't control it completely unless he dominates it. So Cagliostro is telling him, you essentially have to dominate this symbiote, otherwise it's going to cause some massive problems. Tony Twist continues to be the cocksucker that he is, and Tremor wants information on his brother's whereabouts. And Tony Twist tells him, yeah, he's alive. Tremor continues, grabs one of his henchmen, walks away, brings him to Spawn, and he's like, hey, I need your help. What were those names? And then he mentions Wanda's entire family. Spawn and Tremor go after Tony Twist, and Tremor actually discovers that his brother is not dead, but his brother wants nothing to do with him. He's like, yo, my brother's dead, and all that shit. So Spawn just straight up kills his ass. Tremor's like, I'll fucking kill you. And Spawn's like, shut up, continue with the mission. Like, dude, Spawn's a cold-hearted motherfucker. And in the next issue, after building a huge pile of junk in the alleyways so he can hide himself in the dark and away from a ton of people, Spawn's suit is starting to go haywire due to its metamorphosis. It's trying to take control of him. It's feeding off of his rage, his emotions, and it's growing into this insane demon tumor thing that attacks Cagliostro. But Cagliostro repels it back with a spell. And almost to mirror this storyline, Terry starts to grow a tumor in his brain as well. But Spawn eventually just heals him of that. And due to him losing the last remaining bit of his powers, Spawn is sent back to hell, where he's forced to face a ton of demons. Where he's forced to also face his sins head on and experience them through various illusions and, torture and all that shit. So he makes it out of there after getting into a fight with Savage Dragon, another dude from the Savage Dragon comic series in hell. He fights the Hellspawn Billy Kincaid and just lobs his fucking head off like nothing. And Spawn is sent back to Earth by Malbolgia because of the potential that Spawn shows. Spawn gets revenge on Jason Wynn by destroying his arsenal and stealing his weapons, freeing a man who Spawn and Wynn once imprisoned named Major Forsberg, who is essentially just insane and afraid of everything now. So once Spawn is chillin', he has his first fight ever with Saigor, which ends up in Spawn winning by drowning Saigor in a ton of bugs and bats and all this shit. We resume with Eddie and his brother. They're into gangs and all this shit. They're getting into trouble now that they don't have a father figure. They want Spawn to take care of them, but Spawn knows he can't because of the dangerous lifestyle that he lives. Wynn sends a task force after Spawn since Spawn stole his guns. Spawn beats their asses, but this was all a distraction so that the Violator could capture Cyan. But Spawn just tears his ass up with his chains. Then he sucks out his soul like a hooker on Friday nights. In issue 61, Spawn has the Violator's head pinned through a pole. Angela comes to tell Spawn that the glue that is holding the universe is falling apart, and then she is teleported away. But Spawn's face is returned back to normal. But that doesn't last long, and soon he goes back to being an ugly ass motherfucker. And after a little bit of a turf war in the alleyways, Spawn is shot to death inside of a dead zone, which is essentially a patch of heaven on Earth where Spawn loses all of his powers. The Freak comes back eventually, he takes Twitch hostage after Twitch and Sam remove Spawn's body from the dead zone, and then the bugs of the Earth heal Spawn. It's revealed that the Freak killed his doctor, who was actually innocent, and the Freak's just a crazy son of a bitch, so Spawn murks his ass. We meet Wolfram, a vampire rogue who left heaven and left his kingdom, and the kingdom is essentially a group of vampires bent on destroying the world. We'll get more into them later. This guy drops a little baggie of necroplasm in the alleyway, which becomes a giant trash monster called the Heap, which Spawn is forced to fight, which Bootsy witnesses. Now, Bootsy is a homeless dude who is one of Al's friends. He's been helping him on this journey so far, and he is actually secretly one of the highest ranking angels in heaven. So yeah. But Spawn gets consumed by the Heap and is brought into the Green World, where he is essentially forced to face the sins of everyone on planet Earth by the Keeper, who is the keeper of the Green World. And essentially he gains that ability to feel the sins of everyone on the planet at once, and he also gets power over nature, so it's pretty badass. And since the angels view Bootsy as a traitor for interacting with and helping Spawn, they take him back to heaven. And after that, Spawn meets up with Granny Blake, turning her young again because she misses her dead husband, and he even brings her to him in the afterlife. But he tells her she can't stay there, even though she wants to. Then, in a gunfight inside of the alleyways, Twitch is shot in the head. Of course, Spawn heals him and helps him, but now they owe Spawn. And the reason why Sam and Twitch have been getting into so much trouble lately is because they've been investigating a set of murders, and so has Spawn. So we got this guy named Ethan Crone who actually researches Spawn. He's like an edgy ass news reporter. Spawn then finds the killer and then mindfucks her with her own sins. Groups of people are starting to be possessed by Billy Kincaid's ghost, including this kid named Mark Lucas. He even goes after Cyan. He's pretty much controlling a lot of the city right now, and he even takes control of a cop's body, and he wants to fight Spawn mano-a-mano in a dead zone. So Spawn's like, alright man, let's do it. But Billy Kincaid cheats and just shoots his ass, and since Spawn has no powers, this affects him severely. But Spawn continues to fight him regardless inside of the dead zone, and he's winning for a bit, then he starts to lose because he's kind of holding back. He doesn't really want to hurt the cop, and yeah, the cop gets shot in the head, which is done by Twitch, which also kills Billy Kincaid because it was done inside of a dead zone. After this, Spawn essentially has a mental battle with himself where he faces Al Simmons, kills him, and truly becomes Spawn. He kicks everyone else out of the alleyways because he doesn't want to be responsible for their deaths, and he just straight up fucking quits. Spawn kills some abusers. Spawn takes out a corrupt judge. He's just going around cleaning the streets. Then we meet up with Mammon again, one of the demon lords of hell, and he essentially calls Malbolgia a flea compared to him, and Spawn just beats his ass and brands his face. A group of dudes who killed the woman is standing inside of an abandoned house. Spawn investigates this and then finds the man who did it after he kills his friends and takes him with him. We also come across this crazy Satanist motherfucker who essentially abuses his girlfriend as well and wants to become a demon. So Spawn arrives and does the job. Spawn literally puts him through a crazy ass test to become a demon, and the guy actually makes it through all of them. Like, he walks through fire and he makes it to the top of a tower, then he sees a giant demon. So the guy's like, yeah, I could take this motherfucker on, and he jumps down to the demon, but in reality, he just jumps down onto a fucking trident and kills himself. And then we meet two demon gate openers named Ab and Zab. They capture an entire town to release this dark shadow demon god that is older than memory called Urizen. Now, Urizen is literally so powerful, it took the entire armies of heaven and hell combined to imprison him in a void. But now he's out. So him and Spawn battle. Spawn loses the first battle somehow. I don't know, it's kind of an inconsistency because Spawn's not really supposed to be able to get knocked out, so the fact that he got knocked out by being impaled makes really no sense because he doesn't need his organs to survive. Yeah, it's kind of weird. I'm just gonna say it's because Spawn is still evolving, like his metamorphosis hasn't fully completed yet, so he's not fully powered right now. Oh, and Wanda's pregnant, by the way, because Mammon impregnated her. Angela comes over, ripping the goddamn sign out of Spawn, and she's like, what the hell are you doing over there? We need to talk. Since Urizen is out on the Earth, the angels are ready to go in, invade Earth, and save it from Urizen, but Angela stops them, because if they do that, then hell will also be let loose on Earth. And after she gets done defeating the angels, Angela and Spawn fight Urizen together. Spawn sucks Urizen into the Earth, and that's how they defeat him. After this, Spawn and Angela go down to hell to fight Malbolgia. Angela is killed, and Spawn goes on a berserker rage and just fucking slices Malbolgia's head off with a holy weapon, killing Malbolgia. And for this, the angels give him the reward of opening heaven's doors to him. And he doesn't really want it and doesn't give a fuck, so yeah. He tells them to stay out of his world. We then meet Thea. She recalls when her curse started. She was at a funeral and her hand started bleeding. When an elder woman came to check if she was alright, Thea had a vision that that woman would be the next to die. She saw the woman as a corpse instead of herself. She then passed out from the sight. Later in life though, Thea became addicted to drugs and begged for money. She saw a man on the street, and once again, she saw him about to die, and then a car drove by, they did a drive-by, shot their asses, and then Thea's hand started to bleed again. So this is kind of her powers that she has. She panicked and ran into an alleyway, puked out some black shit, which then became Spawn. Terrified at the sight, she ran away into incoming traffic. After getting fucking hit by a car and going to the hospital, she yelled out at Spawn and asks why he was hunting her. So Mammon essentially promises to make all of her problems go away at the toss of a coin, and she agrees obviously. So after he does it, he says that she wasn't really being hunted by Spawn. He was actually there to help. Boom! And Mammon drags her to the afterlife. 3 boys that are brothers actually get infected by Urizen essentially, like he possesses their minds, and they cause a ton of trouble, actually start killing people, and become giant demonic pigs. We call them the Pig Boys. So Spawn just removes the curse from them, and that's their storyline. Overkill is sent to fight Spawn again, but we know how that goes, and as usual, it was Jason Wynn who sent him. So, Spawn literally mindfucks him and makes him think that he has permanently had his skin ripped off. Twitch's son Maximilian is introduced, he starts to get a little crush on this chick, and Spawn meets Simon Pure, the leader of the vampire group called the Kingdom. The short-haired bitch then cuts her lip and has Maximilian drink her blood. Spawn beats the shit out of some of the Kingdom members, discovering their tower. Max is met with their vampire family, pretty much turning Max into a vampire himself. Spawn defeats hundreds of vampires by drowning them in a tsunami that he creates, and he also defeats Simon Pure temporarily. But Simon wasn't done yet. You see, he's the leader of the Kingdom, and this group of 777 vampires actually served heaven. They were determined to lead Earth as its rightful leaders. So, you know what? Simon's like, okay, let's put an S on all of the sinners' heads and then jump down and just fucking cleanse the city of its sins so that we can rule the world. And with the help of Ab and Zab, Spawn creates a portal to destroy all of the vampires. After, we learn about the samurai hell spawn, Nakadai. I don't know how to say his fucking name, you weeps can figure it out. But Nakadai was a man who's won several key battles for the Emperor. He was granted Lord status by the Emperor as a reward, but upon returning home, he learned his wife and son had passed to a fever for the previous season. So, he was struck with grief and ignored his duties as the Lord. One day, though, an old man convinced him to face his fears to discover what type of man he is, and his fears would take the form of a dragon, and he must look it in the eye. So, he traveled the land, freeing its people of bandits, and one day he encountered a boy stumbling, standing on a bridge, and when he approached, the child disappeared. He followed the voice through the jungle until he stumbled upon his dragon. After defeating it in battle, he realized he failed to look it in the eyes, and it failed his mission. And after, he actually faces Spawn, gets defeated by Spawn, but since he looks him in the eyes, he accomplishes his mission. You guys remember Eddie Frank, that guy who had that abusive police officer father? Well, yeah, he's all grown up now and he goes on to a school shooting because, he's been living out in the streets. And then after he gets injured from his own shooting, well, he becomes a redeemer. And he hunts after Spawn because he wants to get vengeance on him for what he did because he left him alone and he kind of brought him into this situation unwillingly. And after he sort of knocks Spawn into the ground, Spawn is sucked under the ground by like rad scorpion demon things. Then we get tiny details into other different types of hell spawns, like a Nordic hell spawn, a Balakesh hell spawn who is unable to save his village. Inside of hell, since there's no throne after Spawn killed Malbolgia, Spawn actually becomes the king of hell, growing 100 times stronger per every single heartbeat. And he just destroys the Violator's ass, and he grows super large, summoning demons and shit. After wearing the crown of hell, he is deceived, thinking he's going to be in a paradise with infinite Wandas, and Cagliostro is the one who deceives him so that he can claim hell's power. Then, Spawn is sent back to Earth with little memory, and his suit kind of just takes control of him whenever it desires. We then meet Nyx. I call her the witch bitch. Now, she's not actually a bitch, because she actually has a good heart. But she essentially started practicing magic at the age of 8, so she's essentially a goddamn master at this shit. Nyx even tries to help Spawn to hone his powers and to get back to where he was. And while Nyx and Spawn start to build a little bit of a relationship, the Violator actually possesses Jason Wynn's body and causes him to do bad shit. Now Maximilian is essentially dead as hell, and Twitch blames Spawn for that. So Spawn, just being the friend that he is, decides to help Twitch save his soul. In the process, Twitch is shot by a ghost girl, Spawn saves him and Maximilian, and Twitch is reunited with his family. The Violator captures Wanda using Jason Wynn's body, but Jason Wynn is knocked off of a building by Spawn, and he survives anyway because the Violator's possessing him. Nyx is actually friends with Thea, so she has some beef with Mammon, and Violator's just going around possessing a ton of people, man. It gets so bad that he's actually possessing most of the city, and Spawn is forced to face them. And after even killing a lot of them, Spawn is left to fucking dwell in his actions. And he just killed a ton of innocent people. So the Violator essentially forced him to do that. And after Spawn is injured from a massive explosion, Nyx takes his power and becomes She-Spawn. And she even teams up with the Redeemer to save Thea from hell. However, Nyx kills her in an act of mercy. Nyx gives Spawn his power back and he knows what she has done. But Spawn is interrupted by the Redeemer and forced to fight him once again. After learning that Mammon is behind a lot of these current events, Spawn just kinda gets fucking pissed with himself. And he just mopes around in the darkness, absorbs bugs, gains power, and then a disciple comes along. This disciple's name is James, and disciples are essentially predecessors to Redeemers, one of the strongest angels in heaven. And essentially he's here to tell Spawn he's not welcome in this patch of heaven, because Spawn's in a dead zone essentially. And Spawn just decides, well, I'm gonna fucking beat his ass. But since Spawn's in a dead zone, he gets his ass beat. From the remnants of Spawn's severed face, this guy comes over, the Man of Miracles, and he creates this kid hell Spawn named Christopher. He makes his way back home looking like a burnt ass chicken nugget, and his mother actually accepts him that way, obviously, because she's his mother. And then since Spawn got defeated in a dead zone, well, he's getting tortured in hell by the god of tortures, Thamus. On Earth, the sky starts raining toads, so Sam and Twitch decide to investigate. But after investigating for a bit, they find Christopher. Christopher leads them to hell, and it is actually revealed that Christopher is a lost soul that resides within Spawn's body. So he gets inside of Spawn's body and all of the souls are put together. We then meet Katie and Jake Fitzgerald, who are essentially God and Satan within two human bodies. Damn near apocalyptic events start going on. We learn more about two new souls in Spawn's body, Hiroshi and Kumiko, and they just help Spawn deal with this horrific situation. We are then introduced to Zera, the queen of the Seraphim, a chick who was so fucking powerful and so fucking crazy, she was literally incarcerated by God because she was so dangerous. She's literally one of the most powerful beings in the universe. Like, she is so insane that her madness literally manifests itself into a giant monster. But heaven needs her. We also look into the background of Kumiko and Hiroshi. Now, essentially, Kumiko was like a rebellious little bitch. So, you know, since Hiroshi was her grandfather, he still cared for her. And she went out to this club of gang members, and they fucking took advantage of her. And then her fucking grandfather came in with a samurai sword and just gutted their ass. And then they both got shot to death. Spawn also battles against the Hindu goddess of destruction, Kali, but she's just a demon essentially, like a really powerful one. And obviously Spawn struggles because at this state, Spawn isn't exactly at like full power or anything like that. He's kind of just going along, you know, and Spawn also adapts and gets stronger and stronger and stronger as the issues progress, so yeah. The two lost souls in Spawn's body convince the Hindu goddess to back off, and she spares Spawn. Kate and Jake Fitzgerald both tie up Wanda, and after Zera arrives, it's revealed that Jake is actually God himself, and also that Kate is Satan himself. But before Spawn and Zera can fight, the the Mother of Existence stops them and reveals herself. She says that she was Kali. She was the keeper of the green world, and she was also the man of miracles. She's essentially the creator of existence. Like, there is no being more powerful than this chick. She also created God and Satan. So there's that. So, yeah, that explains why Spawn had a bit of trouble against her when it came to facing Kali. It is mentioned how God and Satan created the planet, which God also created the universe, by the way. This is said later, but she created God and Satan. So technically she created existence because they're her children. But anyway, I digress. Satan essentially kept messing with God's creations, so that's how this endless rivalry began. And now, since God and Satan are free, Armageddon has essentially begun. Wanda can't deal with it, so she tries to kill herself. But the Mother of Existence stops the bullet, which, by the way, the Mother of Existence isn't actually female. Since it's a being beyond comprehension, it isn't male or female, but it's easier to just call it a she. But yeah, she stops the bullet because she knows that if Spawn watched Wanda die here, he would lose the will to fight. Rapture begins, Grandma Blake is lifted into heaven along with everybody else, but when her sight is restored by God, well, she's fucking terrified. Trying to save Earth, Spawn battles Heaven's 12 disciples at once and literally mops the floor with their asses. Floods are happening around the Earth, man. Like, it gets crazy. Spawn kinda wants to give up after being stabbed in the chest by one of the disciples' swords, but the Mother of Existence ain't having that shit, and she just like puts a fruit next to his mouth and imbues him with the power of fucking God, essentially, and makes him Divine Spawn. All of the lost souls that were in his body also leave, but he keeps all of their wisdom and experience, so that's pretty OP. And now that he's Divine Spawn, he whoops Zera's ass, kills Thanos, and wipes out Hell's army. God and Satan are pissed about this, obviously, and they both try to destroy him. Thinking they did, Spawn actually trapped them into their own realities, and even though they're all knowing, they are so blinded with hate and rage for each other that they just battle there endlessly. Then, Spawn uses the powers he has to recreate the Earth in his own image. Spawn thinks he's coming home, but he realizes his true tragic past. He killed his baby. He essentially, he had his own abortion done to Wanda. Alright, now let's get into one of my favorite Hell Spawns, okay? The Mandarin Spawn. At the end of the Sung Dynasty, this guy was essentially a deformed beast that they tortured, made fun of. They didn't even view him as human because he was so fucking ugly. Okay? And eventually he died from these tortures. So this man came back from hell, went against the Emperor, slaughtered them all, took his bitch, and became the new fucking Emperor, like a fucking Chad. And I forgot to mention this to you guys, but Mammon took Nyx's powers as well. So she tries to get him back from this weird fucking gypsy guy. Nyx kills him because Zera takes control of her mind, and then she stabs Spawn with the sword. After Zera's head is destroyed though, Mammon decides to return Nyx's power because he says he doesn't need it anymore. And Nyx actually fell in love with Spawn, but Spawn says that he's a monster. So he tells her all the terrible things he's done, and she forgives him. That's how good-hearted this witch bitch is. Then Ab and Zab are up to no good, literally opening portals to hell and people's biggest nightmares. A demon tries to trick Spawn becoming Wanda, but Nyx comes in and reveals that it's not. So Spawn fucking gets super angry, saying, "You defile her," and he tears this demon apart, no problem. Al meets his brother again, Richard Simmons, for the first time in a while. He's now turned a preacher. And him and Al are both responsible for killing Mr. Malefic. Richard, though, is devoured by his own sins because he can't bear to live with what he's done. But on to probably my favorite Hell Spawn, other than the main Al Simmons Hell Spawn, and that is Gunslinger Spawn. We start with Francis Parker, who later took the name Henry Simmons, Al Simmons' great-grandfather. He was a deserter who was to be lynched alongside another man, Jeremy Winston, in the town of Bane. Winston is a preacher, and he had been framed for murdering his family and was condemned to death. So, Mammon approached both of them and granted the chance for revenge. Now, Parker refused, but Winston accepted. During the proceedings of the execution, Mammon caused a malfunction that ultimately saves Parker's life. However, Winston is killed. and after Winston resurrects as the Gunslinger Spawn, he slaughters every resident in the town of Bane, sparing only Francis Parker. We also have an ugly-ass incel villain named Kenneth who turns into a giant tendril monster and throws this bitch out of the window. And after dealing with this stupid-ass incel villain, then we get to Spawn's other brother, Mark Simmons, and he's just a top FBI agent. So we're getting a lot of cool characters in these issues. So the next cool one is Miranda. And Miranda is essentially Al's aborted child who died and Mammon took and raised as a Hellspawn. Now let's talk about Wanda Blake's great-grandfather, Captain Thomas Curran, aka World War I Spawn. He was an English soldier in the First World War, and he also had a forbidden relationship with a black woman named Selma. Eventually they have a kid, they name him Michael, he goes to war, and he gets blown up in battle. So Thomas is forced to choose whether to let his son die or to become a Hellspawn by Mammon, and he chooses to become a Hellspawn and lead endless armies into battle in hell in preparation of becoming a leader for Hell's Legions. Not being able to deal with the pain anymore, Spawn just barges into Terry and Wanda, and he just literally steals Wanda. He actually contemplates killing her for a bit, but he realizes this is retarded, and he decides, you know what, this is what I became a Hellspawn for, this is what I sacrificed my soul to the devil for, so I'm gaining my humanity back. K7 Letha, aka Spawn's suit, ain't having this shit though because it likes being in pain. After Nyx is imbued with the power of a Hellspawn, she goes into a tower where Miranda is held, and Miranda actually takes the suit for herself. But before Miranda can attack them, we are surprised to see that Spawn actually has a few dozen souls left in his body, and he releases them all to fight her. But Miranda's too powerful. These Hellspawns get absolutely fucking raped. Nyx uses a binding spell that traps both Mammon and Miranda, and we actually have met a future older version of Cyan who interacts with the younger Cyan, and she knows what Spawn becomes and what happens to him. And after being done with all of this bullshit, Spawn decides to kill himself. And as soon as he does, a man named Jim Downing wakes up in a hospital bed. And he's been in this coma for about 4 years now. So the doctors are amazed and they think it's a miracle that he even woke up. But in those 4 years, this nurse Sarah has been taking care of him, and she's slowly been falling in love with him while she was doing so. But demons now know that Jim Downing is awake, so they come after his ass. And we are introduced to Mark Rosen, a writer and blogger who notices that crazy shit's going on with these demons at the hospital. However, the demons are easily killed because don't forget, Spawn's suit is a symbiote and it has a mind of its own. So it actually kills the demons. And Jim just has an overall really hard time trying to control this symbiote. Then we meet with an angel, and that angel tells us about Jim Downing and how he was a traitor to God. So Jim Downing was actually an angel himself. After the Violator discovers her angel, he decides to rip off her wings, and when you do that, angels essentially turn insane in this universe. Mark also has a girlfriend named Susan who is very distant from him because he's always so caught up in his work. And because he's always trying to chase a new story, he actually interviews Sarah and Jim Downing. While this is all happening, the Violator is tricking Jim Downing into thinking that the Violator is a good guy. And a big green juggernaut looking son of a bitch tells Jim Downing that he was supposed to be the last patient, and they are both patients. And Jim Downing is actually patient 47. So they did experiments on them. The freak returns but is actually revealed to be Malbolgia in disguise. Malbolgia tells Jim Downing that when Al Simmons killed himself, he created a new breed of Hellspawn, the Omegas. They're essentially just cracked up Hellspawns on steroids that just maul other Hellspawns to death. And the Omega Spawn comes to the alleyways to fight Jim Downing and the Violator, which they struggle with a lot at first because he's so powerful, and then Jim Downing's suit just takes control and fucks up this Hellspawn. And after the attack at the hospital when Jim Downing woke up from his coma, all of the patients that were near Jim Downing actually became healed. So, Jim Downing starts to be viewed as this Jesus Christ celebrity type of figure. Jim actually got so popular that he demanded that this rich-ass vampire named Blood gives him money for his foundation. And Susan, Mark Rosen's girlfriend at one point, decides to cheat on Mark with Jim Downing because she feels so lonely. Fragments of Jim Downing's past still haunt his mind as he wonders what happened to his wife that he once had before. And at one point, because the Violator wants to stop Jim Downing and take his suit and powers and shit, he sends these 3 demon guys who are kind of rejected from heaven and hell, so they do their own thing. They're kind of mercs. So yeah, Spawn fights them all, sucks them into the dark, tortures them and shit. Twitch meets Jim Downing as Spawn for the first time, and he wants to know where Al is. Now, Jim Downing has heard rumors about Al, he knows about Al, so he asks Twitch to follow him. And that is where Twitch discovers Al's dead body. Since Twitch knows a lot about Al, Jim Downing wants to learn more about him too, because he's been hearing a lot about him, and because he's been having visions, and because he has this fucking symbiote suit. Jim Downing also learns about the Violator's plans to gain power and rule over Hell's armies, but he knows he can't defeat Malbolgia without the Violator's help. So he's in a predicament. Jim Downing is shot in his human form. In a series of flashbacks, we discover that Jim, or Kramer as he was called, was in a partnership with Jason Wynn. Now, they used funding for Kramer's genetic experiments. The Pentagon wanted Kramer's research to yield super soldiers, and when they failed to see results, Wynn pressured Jim to extract more and more information from his wife, a leading geneticist named Professor Gebhard. Jim then apparently murdered his own wife to complete the tasks, and his final patient was himself. Malbolgia is in the search for bits and pieces of his power that the Violator is hidden around the city, so Jim Downing is like the first person he goes to interrogate, and Malbolgia like stabs him through the chest and shit. But then, in a surprising turn of events, Jim Downing sprouts angelic wings inside of the dead zone, and Malbolgia is like, holy fuck. They battle for a bit, and since Malbolgia isn't at full power, Jim Downing defeats him, removes him from the freak's body, and then just kills the freak anyway. And here we get a cool hell spawn, and that's the Wings of Redemption spawn. And this spawn is essentially Jim Downing if he combines his angelic powers with his hellspawn powers. And the symbiote suit is starting to grow more and more eager for power, taking over Jim Downing in a way. And our old friend Tremor meets with Jim Downing, pissed off because he knows that Jim Downing was one of the leaders in this project that created him. Jim cures him of his Tremor form, and they search together to find more clues about Project Ragnarok, which is what the Superhuman Project was called. In another twist of events, as they reveal more and more about this project, they learn that Jason Wynn ordered the hit on Kramer's wife, and that's how she died. Kramer didn't kill her. So Jim goes after Jason Wynn, obviously. Wynn reveals more information about Jim Downing's past and how he had very similar brain patterns to Al Simmons. So Wynn intended to learn more about it, but when Al Simmons returned as Spawn, Jim Downing slipped immediately into a coma, so Jason Wynn had to move him from hospital to hospital to conceal his identity, and eventually he gave him the name Jim Downing. Wynn explained to Downing that what he wanted and what he needed was for Spawn to kill him. He had a deal in place with Heaven that could only be achieved if he was killed by Spawn, but no matter how badly he tormented Al Simmons, he would never kill him. Now that Jim was Spawn, he asked to kill him once and for all. Downing obliged, but not in the way that Wynn wanted. Downing was unique as the only living Spawn, and he had the ability to send away his symbiote at will. So he did this and killed Jason Wynn as himself, Jim Downing, not Spawn. Susan kills herself because of her loneliness, but the Violator brings her back, possessing her body with a new demon, and then he orders that demon to go and trick Jim Downing to gain info. The curse returns after hearing that all of these people are being healed by Jim Downing, so he's trying to extract the darkness out of them, right? But then the Haunt comes over and just fucking murks his ass. But it is revealed that every person that Jim Downing has healed has been implanted with darkness by the suit. And once Jim Downing goes to his own realm of light, he discovers Max Williams. And Max Williams just tells him all the information he needs to know. That his suit is about to kill him and that he needs to kill his suit before his suit kills him. He also explains the vampire leader, Blood's origin. Blood was born in the time of the Garden of Eden, and his name had long been forgotten. But what is known is that he had a lust for power after he learned of Lilith, Eve's sister, and the first vampire. He began stalking the woman like prey. He watched and waited and learned while Lilith drank the life from others. When the time was right, Blood made his move, and he allowed himself to fall victim to Lilith. But while she drank his blood, he managed to transfer his soul to her body and push her aside. Thirsty for power, Blood feasted on all the other vampires until he believed they had been destroyed, save for Lilith's soul, who had gone missing. So that's when he began scheming to get into heaven so that he could find Lilith, the one vampire outside of his influence, and destroy her once and for all. He also repopulated all of the vampires with his own bloodline. Jim Downing tries to kill himself after this so that his suit won't gain his power and won't take control, but this fails because the suit covers him last minute. And since Cagliostro has some experience with this symbiote shit, he decides to help Jim Downing remove his. So the first step starts with Cagliostro bringing Jim Downing to the Dead Zone, where he tells him that this is why most of the wars on the world have been fought. It is also further expanded upon as to the origin of Earth. You know, the Adam and Eve storyline from the Bible, it's pretty canonical, it's pretty accurate to that, but instead of just being God who created humans, it was a 50-50 thing between God and Satan. See, everyone has a mixture of both heaven and hell's DNA, so they both have the capacity for both good and evil. So Lilith is like Eve's evil sister, essentially. And since Solomon Pure assumed that Blood is weak, he wants to help Blood with his mission. Solomon Pure is assumed to be the brother of Simon Pure, the old vampire leader. And in a moment where Jim Downing decides to reject both heaven and hell, his symbiote takes control, makes fun of Cog, telling him how his suit gave him so much power, and look at him now, and Cog's like, yeah, that's exactly why I wanted to destroy you. So the suit just literally slits Cog's throat. The suit taunts Jim Downing to show himself to break out, and he does, truly forming into the ultimate Wings of Redemption Spawn. Jim revives Cog, and Cog is concerned because a Hell Spawn has never merged with angelic powers before. Blood and Solomon Pure find the Dead Zone, and it's what they've been searching for this whole time. But the Violator sends the Redeemer after them, and he slaughters their asses. Blood escapes, he's not too happy with the Violator, and he doesn't really trust him, so the Violator decides to take Sarah hostage, which makes Jim so pissed off that he actually laces a scalpel with the dirt from the Dead Zone so that it nullifies the Violator's powers, and he can just torture the Violator as much as he wants. You see, the Violator brought her into a separate reality called the Black, and there's a lot of demons there, so Spawn saves Sarah's ass from it. Sarah later then gets possessed by the Violator, and possessed bitch Sarah goes after Jim, and like with the power of Jesus, he saves her. After Sarah is taken to the hospital, it is revealed that Jim Downing is the one that accidentally infected her by banging her fucking cheeks. I don't know why I said it like that. Demon bitch Susan is trying to touch Jim Downing as much as possible so that she can drain power from him. Daniel Kilgore lets Mark Rosen know what's happening with Jim Downing and his suit, how he doesn't really control the Spawn costume. Jim Downing brings Blood up on top of a bridge and ties him to it because he wants to know how to cure Sarah. And one of his ideas for doing that is by putting the symbiote onto Blood. So he does just that, which causes the symbiote suit to come alive and talk shit to Jim Downing, telling him that he doesn't know shit about how this works and he was the one healing people all along. But Jim Downing thinks that he has the upper hand because the suit gave form to his own evil. But because Downing doesn't want the suit to spread any more of its evil, which it threatened to do, He literally flies into space Superman style and drops it from the atmosphere. Then after battling for a moment, the suit transfers itself back to Jim Downing. The entire city literally becomes infested with bugs because of the symbiote suit. And while the city is being destroyed by those bugs and rats and all those dark creatures, Jim is fighting with this symbiote trying to get free from its grasp. This symbiote is literally so powerful it takes out naval fleets. But Jim is smart about this and brings the symbiote into a dead zone where it won't pass. However, Jim sticks his arm out a little too far and gets it bitten off by the symbiote. And then large necroplasmic cracks appear in the ground and Jim gets dragged under along with the symbiote. And it is in this moment where Spawn is met by God in the form of his childhood pet dog. God explained how he created the universe and how he forced himself to not know its end. And God tells him what has happened to Wanda, how Wanda had died at the hand of demons, how he blames Satan for it, how Satan is evil. So, Spawn is like, fuck this guy, I'm gonna kill Satan. But God gives him a weapon to do so with. He gives him the God Sword. And this is the beginning of Spawn Resurrection. And since then, Wanda has been hiding in the darkness, protecting Al's unborn child. Spawn is sent a messenger by God to help him out, and his name is Mike. And Mike reveals that he was once an angel who had to give up everything because he went against God with this demon named Belial. And Wanda was in the fray of that just because they knew that God wanted Al's soul. Spawn is haunted by his past. An old grandmother who had a grandson that was linked to the cartel was tortured and killed because they wanted more information about it, but she didn't have any info. Spawn even discovers his father on his deathbed, where he decides to save him by guiding him through the demons and escaping through a portal. The devil wants Spawn's symbiote and he'll do anything to get it, so he essentially tries to make a deal with Spawn that he'll bring Wanda back, and this is essentially the deal that Spawn made in the first place, which got him here, so he ain't having that. And since he's going to go after Satan, he puts a mark on all of Terry Fitzgerald's family to protect them from any demons. He interrogates Barry, the newscaster demon, to get more information on Satan. Spawn partners with the Violator to get back into hell, which causes conflict with his partner Angel. But either way, Spawn makes it in there, and this is the beginning of the ultimate battle between Spawn and Satan. Which is a long battle where Spawn fights different demon lords, kills them all, defeats Satan by using his suit as a nuke, and then sealing off all of the dead zones with his God Sword. This makes it so no angel nor demon can return to Earth, and every single one that's in Earth is locked inside. So, Spawn returns to Earth with pretty much no powers since he used all of them on Satan. And while doing some vigilante stuff by hunting down the remaining demons on Earth, he encounters one called Decay. And Decay essentially is a mummy that decays anything he touches. So Spawn defeats him by evading him and knocking him off of a rooftop. He partners up with Earl, who's a retired vet, and they do some crazy things together. I mean, Spawn actually fights some villains from the Savage Dragon universe. He partners up with Ant, who's a hero in the Savage Dragon universe, and he fights King Spider, who is a villain, I guess, from the Savage Dragon universe. They also fight Monstrous, defeating her, and Spawn actually reunites with Cyan, who's a lot older now. She's pretty much an emo teen. And Spawn continues to go around slaying all the demons and doing vigilante shit. Earl helps him with this, but he's doing it reluctantly, and the only reason he's doing it is because he wants to help provide for his older mother. Cyan gains the ability to make Spawn's powers act very strange. We meet a man who uses weaponized technology and deadly gas to kill his victims. His name is the Soul Crusher. And since the demons and angels have noticed that there's been an awakening in Cyan's powers, they're trying to come after her. So they send even the SWAT after Spawn, but he just claps them. Soul Crusher goes after Cyan, but since Spawn has regained back a little bit of his strength, he totally overpowers Soul Crusher. Cyan rejuvenates Spawn's powers, and to keep Cyan safe from these demons, Spawn brings her to Japan, where he thinks she'll be safe. But actually what happens is this turns into the Spawn horror arc, and some ghostly, creepy demons start coming out and hunting after Cyan. A family that Twitch trusts actually takes care of Cyan and sort of fosters her as her family while she's there. Then we got demon gangs who inject necroplasm to gain powers, and we also got suicide bomber demons, a crow demon lady, and a man who can mind control people. He actually goes up against Spawn at one point, but Spawn's suit retaliates and turns into a pack of dogs going after him. After shooting Spawn with the necroplasmic pistol, hurting him, the crow lady picks up Shizumu, that's the telepath's name, and tells him he's got to be more careful. After interrogating more angels and demons, Spawn learns that because of the fact that he sealed off the dead zones and these angels and demons are stuck on Earth, now they are trying to gain as much power on Earth as possible. Another demon is discovered, his name is Tamura, and he speaks with the boss, the head of this whole demon gang, and he's some creepy Hellraiser looking motherfucker. When the crow lady attacks once again, Cyan actually teleports herself underneath the ocean. So she is discovering that she has crazy powers, and they use this to their advantage, tricking Cyan to kill off the entire family that was taking care of her, which leads to Spawn killing Shizumu and Cyan getting captured. Spawn hunts after the demons in a rage, creates an illusion that makes the crow lady think that she's killing Cyan, but she's actually killing her friend, Tamuru. And then he kills the crow lady by shapeshifting. With all that damage done, the boss arrives, and he's like over 200 feet tall, he's giant. They battle and Cyan winds up killing the boss with their mind powers. Knowing now that Cyan has truly obtained these powers, Spawn decides to teach her everything he knows about them. That leads us to a new arc where Spawn wants to expose the angels and demons on the Earth to ruffle their feathers. And he does this by getting some Eminem ripoff rapper who he uses to get social media presence. He even intentionally puts himself in prison to gain more exposure and to learn more about the inner workings of their operation. It's in this prison where we discover Overkill's body, who he rewires, rebuilds, and now controls. He also teams up with Mark Rosen, killing Susan immediately because he knows she's a demon. It is then discovered that Spawn's old enemies like the Freak, the Curse, Saigor, all of those enemies that were killed were resurrected, and Spawn now controls them as allies. The Violator wants to claim more power for himself, so he decides to try to kill Spawn and take his suit, and he puts these power dampening skulls on Spawn's face, but that doesn't work. We then learn more about Spawn's costume itself, and its reasons for having these colors and skulls and all that. You see, during one of Hell's Great Wars, there were opposing commanders, one black and the other white. They took their heads and mounted them on pikes for all of Hell to see as a symbol that Satan was above them all. But instead it led to an even greater battle as both sides fought to seize possession of their enemy's head at the site of the first Armageddon. And Heaven jumped into the fray willingly, thinking they could sweep in and take over Hell. But like every creature ever made, the angels and demons had one driving desire, and that was survival. And the only way to attain that was for them to join forces, which creates the first Hell Spawn. After meeting with Blood to learn more about Jim Downing, he's not pleased with the results, so he goes all vampire on him. And then after, he goes to a hospital to revive Jim Downing. One of Heaven's most powerful warriors, a godsend, is sent after Spawn because they don't like that he's revealing them to the public, and after they fight, the godsend is forced to flee. The Violator doesn't like how he's exposing himself to the public either, so he drags him to this desert where Spawn's exposed to extreme sunlight. Now, Spawn is partially weak to extreme levels of light, and that's because he's partially a vampire. But this isn't enough to kill him because it's only partial. And where there's light, there's shadows, so he can summon the dead or Overkill or anyone he wants out of his shadow to mess up the Violator. And it's here where Spawn actually pins his head on a spike because, he kind of deserves it. Cagliostro warns the angels what Spawn is capable of and what he can do and how he can end all of their existence. So they band together to make a plan against him. Nyx and Jessica Priest, like the rest of the world, are seeing Spawn's showings and they're worried about it. As they should be, because Nyx is killed here and Jessica Priest gains the powers of She-Spawn. In the same issue, which is issue 300, Spawn encounters a bigger and badder Violator and he's captured by him using the light that the Violator loves to use now. It's like solar panels that are all around him kinda, and Godsend is there as well. But what Spawn does to escape this is he battles them for a bit, and then he uses his suit as a nuke once again to nuke the Violator and Godsend. But to backtrack, he actually sucked the Redeemer into a shadow, and then he actually, I guess, redeemed the Redeemer and had him join sides with Spawn to fight Heaven. As we know, Jim Downing is awakened, and a man moves to a temple. In the moment of the explosion, all of the classic Hellspawn are brought onto the Earth. The Gunslinger, the Mandarin, She-Spawn, all of them. And after Spawn faces an intangible Hellspawn, he decides to grab his weapons because he's in his classic state now after destroying that suit. Yup, we're back to stage 1, boys. So he grabs his weapons, and then we move on to a futuristic storyline. And that's where the Freak kills his brother Greg. After, the man who was approaching the temple kills himself and becomes the Ninja Spawn. She-Spawn goes to Al Simmons first because she just got these powers and Al's the only person she knows that knows how to deal with them. It turns out Medieval Spawn has appeared back on Earth, and it is also revealed that Cagliostro was the one that killed Nyx. Medieval Spawn also has the sword that we see in MK11, by the way. Heaven and Hell are both frantic because they don't really know what to do, so they're just trying to make crazy shit happen, you know, cause chaos, and this creates some conflict between Jessica Priest and Spawn. But, you know, they work it out and then they continue to battle together. The Medieval Spawn is even sent after Spawn, and when they battle, eventually it comes to the point where Spawn actually takes control of Medieval Spawn's sword, like Thor's hammer. And then he just lobs off his head, which apparently he's not supposed to do because Hell Spawns are not supposed to kill other Hell Spawns. Spawn tries to inspect Medieval Spawn's body, but he's enveloped by a demonic bubble. Spawn then slices off Claudia's head, and this pisses off the Raptor, making him reveal that Spawn was the one who destroyed their future. And if you're confused right now, Spawn literally pulled himself through a time continuum loop, so that's why he's in the future. Billy Kincaid returns using Raptor's sacrifice and his power. A demon named Javier has taken control over somebody's body, and Cog has come to him asking him for help, because the Gunslinger Spawn is returning and he's coming after them. And he makes it. He shoots Javier in the head, and Cog tells him to test him. So, after Javier gets shot in the head, he turns into like a Hell Spawn, and he starts fighting the Gunslinger Spawn, but the Gunslinger Spawn gets the upper hand and slices off Cagliostro's head. Jim Downing is starting to question Al's leadership, so he tries to fight him by shooting him with like necroplasmic heat vision. But this doesn't really affect Spawn at all, and he just shows him who's boss. The Medieval Spawn suit has been acting odd, and people didn't know who was inside of it until now. Now we know that Mark Rosen was the one donning the suit. Gunslinger Spawn kicks some major angel ass with this new modern weaponry. Jessica Priest meets up with him, and she makes a proposition that if he helps her on this journey of defeating Heaven and Hell, then she will help him find a way back to his time. While Spawn is on an island fighting this new giant creature that looks like a giant Hellspawn called Monolith, which since Spawn is in his weakened state, he gets defeated by. And after that, Monolith takes Spawn to a new headquarters where they torture Spawn with gas and shockwaves and shit, but Spawn tanks most of it, so they take him to the leader of the island, the Omega Spawn. It is revealed that Cog actually survived his decapitation, and the Omega Spawn captured him and put him in a cell where he wants to get more info, so he asks Spawn to do that. But Medieval Spawn comes out, stabbing the Omega Spawn. They battle him, it's beautiful, and a really cool looking Hellspawn comes out. He's called the plague. And after a few issues of badass battling, the Omega Spawn is defeated and sucked into the black hole with the plague. Once they return back to base, they're on a new mission, and that's to stop the vampires that have been going against this whole planet. So Spawn meets up with Gino to learn more about the vampires, and he beats his ass because the dude captured people. The Soul Crusher returns. He battles with Saigor, and I'm not even joking when I say this, he punches him into the atmosphere with one hand. That's how OP this guy's goddamn suit is. Spawn battles him with a mace, which I think is also for Mortal Kombat, and he winds up beating his ass. Spawn winds up winning, obviously, only letting him survive because he had a vision of Wanda. Spawn is now in kind of a free-for-all, just hunting down whatever evil he can to remove it from the earth, and he finds a dude who has captured and raped a woman in his basement. So Spawn literally tortures him like crazy, creating all sorts of contraptions and shit. A town loses all power, which lures the vampire cartel to that area. And the leader of this vampire cartel is named the Rebirth. Rebirth wants a temporary alliance with Spawn, but as usual, Spawn ain't having it. So he starts stabbing Spawn and shit, telling him that he knows he's weakened, he has no power, but Spawn says, I have enough, and he resurrects the dead. After that, Spawn winds up defeating him, severing his head, putting a stake through his heart, and telling the other vampires to tell their true master that this is just the beginning. And currently, when Mark Rosen dons the Medieval Spawn suit, Medieval Spawn sort of possesses him, so it's not actually Mark Rosen controlling it. Speaking of new Hell Spawns, they reveal the Centurion Spawn. And this spawn was just a spawn that was super feared, revered, you know, typical shit. And then this holy warrior named the Forsaken captures him, which they have done to many others. The Forsaken wants to get back into heaven, but he's banished by God, and he has to do things to earn his respect and trust again. Spawn teams up with Haunt so that they can face the angels and find Cagliostro together. One of the Hell Spawns that was captured by the angels is a Dark Detective Spawn, and they're using him obviously to gain intel and to learn more. The Haunt wants Spawn to open up the dead zones because if he doesn't, the Haunt will eventually die. And also, if he does open them, then he can cure his old wife or girlfriend or whatever that's named Lydia. But Spawn isn't going to do it, because if he opens it, then the whole world will be flooded with demons and angels. The angels use the Dark Detective to frame Simmonsville Spawn into thinking that he created this cult of hell spawns that kill politicians and do evil. This angel named Cordelia is sort of like God's messenger, and the Forsaken believes that she has fallen for God's lies. Cordelia is secretly one ugly ass bitch, and she's sick of the Forsaken's whining. But she's scared to see what he'll do when he figures out that God is never taking him back. The Dark Detective Spawn possesses another body, and a man grabs hold of him, draining all of his energy. Who is this? It is Cagliostro, now in a futuristic Lex Luthor type of suit, and he calls himself Sin. Ha ha ha, you didn't think I'd let you leave without reminding you one more time about New Take, did you? Nah. So, listen, click the link below. I got all sorts of awesome comic books that you guys would love if you love Spawn. We also have films and games if you're into that as well. But anyway, that's pretty much a really quick summary of Spawn from issue number 1 to where we are currently, which is issue number 328. If you guys want more in-depth reviews of Spawn, then subscribe to the channel because we got plenty of them. But anyway, like the video if you enjoyed the video. If you didn't enjoy the video, don't be a pussy. Like the video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!